intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. Intersectionality isn't so much a grand theory, it's a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. African American girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. That's probably a race and a gender problem. It's not just a race problem, it's not just a gender problem. So I encourage people to think about how the convergence of race stereotypes or gender stereotypes might actually play out in the classroom, between teachers and students, between students and other students, between students and administrators, and commit themselves to understanding that as a way of intervening and providing equal educational opportunity for all students, regardless of their identities. Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit. It is a relationship between people in history, people in communities, people in institutions. So schools do a good job when they understand that and when they commit themselves to curricular development, to opportunities in the school for all students to understand the histories that have brought us to this particular moment. You can't change outcomes without understanding how they've come about. So independent schools can take the lead on that to be responsive to their student populations and to the communities out of which the students come.
In 1989, Professor Kimberlé Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality as a framework to describe how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics intersect with one another and overlap. We wanted to know what intersectionality meant to everyday people in their everyday lives. So we hosted 3 interviews. The first with Joshua A. Campbell, playwright, poet, and teaching artist. The second with V. Salakis, community activist and former police officer. And the third with Michelle Morigliano, education manager and mother. We asked them 2 questions. What does intersectionality mean to you? And how does it show up in your everyday life? Campbell. Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and everyone today. As you know, we're talking about intersectionality, and I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, what does intersectionality mean to you?
Yeah, intersectionality, to me, as I'm learning in this moment, is really about the collision of identities that you hold in the spaces that either welcome you or don't. And when I think about identity, I think about not only what we label as social labels such as queer, Black, male, female, and everything in between, but it's also about the things that we don't think about typically, which includes disabilities, which includes places we go, places we frequent, our relationship to people, our relationship to objects, our relationships to different things in our culture. So intersectionality to me means the collision, and from collision, sometimes you get bridges, bridges mended, and bridges fractured. So that's what I think about when I think about intersectionality.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
My queer identity is at the forefront when I am in a classroom, because kids can get over my Blackness, but they have to navigate my queerness in a way, because they may or may not have a reference point, versus my work with nonprofits. They prioritize my Blackness in terms of where I get placed for jobs, in terms of things I'm asked to do or not do.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about where people want to place me. And the second to that, it then becomes a conversation of how do I want to show up? Because I'm always negotiating
Mm-hmm.
4, 5, 6 identities that are that are hidden, that folks don't see on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So then that becomes an interesting conversation about which of the unseen identities show up and where they intersect. And I think to take it a step further, as we look at Black Lives Matters in terms of messaging and branding, we typically have excluded folks that have multiple identities. So they could be queer and they've been excluded at times from the movement. They can be trans. They can have disabilities. They could be immigrants. So as we're thinking about global narratives and anti-racism and breaking down the idea of Blackness as a monolith and the ideas of what it means to be token or have respectability politics in our as a Black community and a Black culture, our implicit biases and internalized racism, we always have that negotiation as well that's on a deeper level, because it can be the bringing together with even within a community or outside of the community, right? Because you can be pushed out and always feel a sense of isolation and outsiderness, even within a culture.
Yeah. How do you see intersectionality showing up for you personally or in your work? And this conversation will be viewed by educators, by parents, by students, with a lot of different passions and kind of positions they're coming from.
Intersectionality is always going to show up because everything that you view and everything that you create is inherently political. I think we have to start there. How I see the world is intersectional because of the characters. So I work as a poet, a playwright, and sometimes a musician if I'm feeling excited about things. And as a creator, I have a due diligence to write about the Black America that I don't see and write about the Black America I wish to live in. That's outside of the America I want to be a part of and participate in. Keywords, a part of and participate in. As an educator, as a Black teaching artist, I have to come into the classroom equipped with how to create work with students who are Black or brown and white, because there are different levels of access and vantage points. And let me uplift Black, brown, and yellow children versus white children. So I have to always think about the material. I have to think about how I curate. I have to think about what is my access point that I'm going to emphasize that allows this thing to become a cultured conversation. And it takes time, energy, and resources, and to really think through what that looks like and how kids are able to feel seen or heard. And and it even approaches in my teaching pedagogy of I always try to get students to bring themselves, uplifting Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, who talks about the excavation of self and digging deep to understand who you are, where you come from, and how that influences your view of the world and your way into understanding empathy and tolerance and where folks are coming from. So I can't see how intersectionality does not show up.
Right.
In the work. I think I said that right.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all know what I mean. But, yeah, that's how I approach it.
Yeah.
I have to. because that's how I live.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are living in the intersections.
Yep, and disrupting the narrative.
Hello, come on.
Awesome. I'm Victoria Salikis, aka V. And how I define is pretty simple. Well, as you can see, I'm a Black female. I'm also an open lesbian. I was a police officer. Now I'm more in the corporate world. So my identity varies, if you will. And I know that sounds crazy, but one thing that Black people are good at is code switching. We have to. And one thing that I have to do more so is I like to know what I'm walking into, because my name is Victoria Saliki, so nobody expects somebody like me walking in. So I'm always cognitive of that. So it depends on what space I'm in, on what that looks like. So like today, I'm at work, and I work for a fine jewelry store. So today that looks like me just on my P's and Q's, yes ma'am, no ma'am, all that good stuff. Earlier today, I taught a class at Carew Police Institute, and it was a lot more laid back and a lot more chill. But I also was the youngest person in the room. I was one of the only black people in the room, and I'm teaching them about leadership. So I needed these people to be able to listen to me and hear what I have to say, despite what I look like. So intersectionality is a constant battle, if you will, to me.
How do you use this concept in your everyday life, in your work?
As an officer, when I was an officer in uniform, and I was at a majority minority events, majority Black events, and white people would come in, when I was in uniform, they would always gravitate towards me, because in my uniform, the Black is covered by the blue. And that was a very pivotal moment for me when I was able to dissect that, because the experience happened to me, and I just kept wondering. I was like, why do they keep coming over here? I thought about it for days and days and days, and that's why they came over there, because I'm not a threat when I'm a cop, because I'm one of them, and that just definitely made me feel some type of way, because I'm that Black that they talk about as much as I'm that Black that they adore.
Right now, like we're in a space where it's about 40 of us, so everybody's pretty close. So now they're more comfortable coming up asking questions. Like obviously George Floyd's trial is coming up, so somebody came and brought that up. They wanted to know, how did I feel about that being Black? How did I feel about that being the ex-officer? First off, I was grateful that they asked those questions. That means that they're aware of what's going on, and they were not Black people who were asking that, so that was great. So we don't have that foolishness like people saying that they're colorblind. No, see me, see that I'm Black. So I use it as a form. I use it just to educate, because I do understand that a lot of people feel like my culture, my people are being dramatic, if you will. It's just, oh, this happened so long ago. Like, why are you still on it? But people are starting to understand, like, no, it's still very much so happening right now. We're still in a fight for equality. We're still in a fight for equity. We're still trying to reach Martin Luther King's dream. We do not have that yet. So I use it to educate. And as an officer, oh my God, as an officer, I was an officer with in the school district. Therefore, I had the pleasure of being in front of a lot of youth. So once again, I was very transparent and letting them know, look, I am a Black female. At that time, when I began being an officer, I did not have a degree of any sort. And I let them know that, because youth, they already thought they had me figured out, because I have a career. Like I'm goals in their mind. I'm like, no, like I'm really just like y'all, just trying to figure it out. Like I was in college most of the time that I was a police officer, so that helped them. And I just let them know my experiences. And I was transparent about my sexuality, as I always am, because there is people looking up to me that I do not know, and there's then people looking at me that I do know, and they're looking disapprovingly, or whatever the case may be. And I still remain professional and still there to do a job. And it's important that those young people got to see that. It's important that they understand that you get to be you, despite how anybody feels about it. You get to be you unapologetically.
And how did you interact with them, out of school, when you saw them on the street, as you were, protecting and serving our community?
Once again, that goes with code switching, just being who I am, depending on who's in front of me, how I respond. So in those spaces, it was a lot of times it's all love, like, and they're usually with their family at that time. Officer T, and I just go and I'm like, what? Like, sometimes it's like, what's up? You know what I'm saying? Instead of, hey, how you doing? It depends on who we're talking to. But in those spaces, it was always really cool because they typically came from a place that you do not like the police, period. That's the families they came from. That's the environment they came from. So it was always really cool to hear them say, but no, this is Officer T, like, she's different. And I thought that was awesome, because they saw me as one of them. That's how I use my intersectionality, because it's still me. I'm still that person that I am outside of uniform. So it was good on one end, but on another end, it's disheartening because I should not have been one of many. I should have been, that should have been the norm. So I use it once again in educating. So if I saw them doing something inappropriate or something that could cause them some harm, as cool as I am, I also have to check the situation and let them know, like, hey, everybody, as you've already stated, everybody's not me. So why are you doing this? Like, chill, just relax, because you don't want problems. And a lot of times we can prevent these types of interactions by just doing something differently. So I'll just educate them on the law, what that looks like. And I always made it very clear to both Black and Brown that the system is not the same. The system is not our friend. The system was not made for us. And I said that in uniform, I'll say it out of uniform. And it's important that they know that, because if they understand, and it was important to come from me, somebody who was in a uniform, somebody who is young and Black. I'm telling you that if I take you to jail, sir, that you are not going to get treated like if I take this guy to jail. So That's why I don't want to have.
Well, Lindsay, thanks so much for being with me today in community to uplift the meaning of intersectionality. For me, when I think of the word intersectionality, I'm reminded of something I heard the Reverend at my church say, which is, you are made of stardust and come to life with love. And so when I think about stardust and the beautiful qualities that come together, I think about intersectionality, and that each one of us comes to this world with identifiers that are deeply rooted in our biology and our family history, and also the culture that we're raised in. And when those identifiers come together, there are times when it can provide us with privilege, and there are times when it can put us into a system of oppression. And so, to be a little bit more specific, when I think about the qualities of that stardust, I think about the socialized racial identities that we hold. And so I've been socialized as a white woman. I think about the gender identities that we hold. I was born as a female infant, and I've been socialized. I feel most comfortable in my identity as a woman. And I also think about the religious identifiers that we hold. And so for my family, I have roots in Christian faith, both the Catholic structures as well as Seventh-day Adventist structures. And those structures come together and ground me in ways that give me confidence. I recognize that being white in America, being Christian in America, even being female in my Italian, Norwegian, Irish family is a privilege. For me, females are cared for and they take on roles of caring. And I also would include class. I come from the roots of working class and poor individuals who care deeply about collective responsibility and holding each other up throughout life. in many different ways. Sometimes that is shelter. As a child, I always had someone else living in my home. And in other times, that is financial support and emotional support. And I also think about the identifiers of how our abilities are presented and grounded in the world. And so for me, I come from 5 generations of individuals who identify with disability. Disability in the way that is labeled as intellectual and developmental disability, psychological disability, as well as orthopedic disability. And so these orientations of life become a privilege when I am advocating for intellectual understanding and ways of being in the world. But they also become a little bit of a bias for me too, because I have to stretch myself to better understand the qualitative experiences of individuals who identify with disability in different ways than I have experienced.
But I'm wondering if there's any times when you really see intersectionality or have to consider intersectionality as a parent.
So to give a little context, I am the parent of 2 24-year-old young men identifying individuals, both who grew up in the world with individualized education plans. And so they identified with disability in very different ways. Both of my children are socialized as white individuals in this world. And so when I think about intersectionality in my early conversations and parenting, I think the themes were more generalized into feeling safe and respected. These constant conversations that uplifted themes of feeling safe and respected, and advocating in conversations with my children that there will be times when you will be with people who you trust and love, and they may say or do something that make you feel uneasy, uncomfortable, and possibly even scared. And when that happens, it's important for you to trust your intuition and your understanding that no matter what is going on in life, you should always feel safe and respected. And because you are in a position of power, you are white men, right? White boys. You may even have to stand up for the stories of Black and brown children in your class or neighborhood, or the religious affiliations of those who are not often accepted in our Americanized society. And when you feel that intuition, I want to encourage you to speak up so that you acknowledge that you are not feeling safe and respected, or somebody who you are with is not feeling safe and respected. And I want you to know that there are other adults. You do not have to do this alone, that there are other adults that you can go to. And I think intersectionality plays a really important role here, because I always try to send my children the message that they might want to talk to me, their female presenting mom, about one topic, but they may feel more comfortable talking with their biological father or their stepfather or their grandfather about another topic, and that they might feel even more comfortable talking with their cousins who identify with the queer community when it comes to another topic. But what is most important is that they have the freedom to identify who they want to support them when they are feeling unsafe and disrespected. And Lizzie, if you have time for a little narrative, I might have a qualitative story for you.
Always have time for your qualitative stories. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a very strong parenting memory when my son Sam was probably 11 or 10 or 11. This was close after 9/11. And it was a spring day, and I was in my home with the windows open so I could hear the children playing outside. And as I was listening, I heard Sam's friend Amar, who identifies as a Sikh Indian American, and his friend Omar, with an O, who identifies as a Black Muslim American, having a conversation. And I did not hear Sam's voice. And you could tell there was an exchange. And as the exchange was going on, like their voices got louder. And then I hear Sam saying, yeah, we're friends. Yeah, that's true. Oh, Omar, you're right. Oh, Amar, good point. And then I heard Sam go silent and their voices got louder and more aggressive. And I thought, what are they talking about? Well, these young boys were debating the history and foundations of their religion. And they were in conflict with what their historical storytelling had taught them about power and position and preservation of their religious foundations. And so I wanted to go out and save them, right? Like I wanted to so much go out and go, boys, what do you need to do to feel safe and respected right now?
Yeah.
But I held back, as a parent, I held back. And I really tried to trust their wisdom in that moment. And I did walk away with some affirmation that Sam was silent. He didn't interject his Catholic values in a way that undermined the narratives these boys were trying to work through. And I would say, Lindsay, within 20 minutes, they were playing kickball in the parking lot. But I think this narrative really uplifts the importance of safe and respected relationships, even when our value systems are grounded in very different and very conflicting ideologies.
So looking at intersectionality as a framework to describe how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics intersect with one another and overlap, we ask you the same questions. What does intersectionality mean to you? And how does it show up in your everyday life?